Virgin.
Shameless.
Grey's Anatomy.
The Office.
Big Brother.
So I think that Jane the Virgin does a really great job representing gender because, for example, they have different male characters, obviously, and Rogelio is very feminine and he likes getting manicures and getting pampered. But on the other side, there's also a character named Raphael, and he's a very typical boy. He likes to work out all the time, play sports, and he's like really business driven. So I think they just do a really great job at showing gender and having both sides by showing that gender doesn't mean you have to fill these gender roles, because the show portrays each gender like having like both sides of kind of what like the typical gender roles are.
The women in the office are generally portrayed as fair and equal, except the nature of Michael Scott's humor, their boss, allows them often to be degraded and objectified.
Gender is represented by portraying women as strong maternal figures. Fiona, the oldest sibling in the Gallagher family, takes care of all of her siblings, pays the bills, and takes care of her father as well. She has been doing this since the age of 16, and Shameless uses Fiona to represent women as motherly figures and strong ones at that.
Gender is represented very well on Grey's Anatomy. We have men, women, and the most recent season even introduces a transgender character as an intern. These genders are all represented as very successful doctors and surgeons. So I definitely think that gender is represented very well, and in fact, the chief of surgery is a African-American woman.
When it comes to gender, Big Brother represents both males and females pretty equally. The show is usually comprised of 16 house guests, both 8 females and 8 males. Genders come together usually and represent their own groups and what their goals are within the show.
The show also really portrays race because the show is mainly around a Hispanic cast, and they even talk about how the grandmother in the show was originally undocumented and her struggles as a Hispanic American to become a citizen.
When it comes to race, Big Brother is not a scripted show. Therefore, it can get a little tricky sometimes. There are many races represented on the show, and sometimes characters don't know what's right and what's wrong and where their boundaries lead. So, a big part of the show is teaching the audience and its house guests what's right and what's wrong. Therefore, a lot of races are represented, maybe not in the best way, but it teaches what's right.
Most of the black characters on the show do not work in the traditional office setting, rather in the warehouse, which supports a general stereotype that people of color work physically labor-heavy jobs rather than office positions. For the black, Hispanic, and Indian characters featured working in the office, Michael often makes bluntly racist comments and jokes, which inclines other characters to laugh about, but also criticize. He also attempts to relate to the black characters in the office by using terms used by the black community, yet often inappropriately.
I think the general stereotype that people have of the ghetto, which is the setting of Shameless, at that it's predominantly made up of people of color. But what this show does, it reveals that there are plenty of poor, dysfunctional, criminal white people and white families as well, because the main family in the show is all white. And not all white families are happy-go-lucky families in the burb.
Race is pretty equally portrayed on Grey's Anatomy. Among the cast, we have white, black, Asian, and even Middle Eastern people, all as pretty successful doctors and surgeons. There aren't any major stereotypes, and the writers even do a good job of bringing up important topics and discussions on race, such as police brutality against African Americans and people of color in modern-day America.
Another category that the show represents is age. They have a 3-year-old Mateo, and then they also have a grandmother, and they obviously have all the people in between. But something they show with the grandmother really well is instead of just showing her as a typical old grandmother, she's very like hip and into the new trends, and she's also dating, and she has a job, and she really helps out with all the family affairs.
Another category represented in The Office is sexual orientation. The only gay character in The Office, Oscar, is a reputable accountant and a likable character. Still, by the nature of Michael's humor, he uses Oscar's sexual orientation to make jokes about him and assume details about his personal life based off stereotypes of the gay community.
A big part of Big Brother is that not only does it represent gender and race, but it represents other ideas as well, such as sexual orientation and physical appearance. Some characters on the show are maybe below average in height or are a gay male who aren't always represented well throughout different forms of media. So a big part of the show is informing its audience and its cast members different ideas and how to respect different cultures and people's physical appearances or who they are in their daily life.
One other aspect that Grey's Anatomy covers is sexual orientation. Sexual orientation can sometimes be a tricky concept to cover when it comes to television or just media in general, but Grey's Anatomy knows how to include these characters without compartmentalizing them into common stereotypes. For example, the gay men on the show aren't shown as very feminine or flamboyant, but rather as just normal surgeons. So I think it goes to show that anyone can be successful regardless of their sexual orientation, which I think is the message that the writers encode and what they want the audience to decode when they watch it.
Class is probably the most predominant representation made throughout the show. Throughout the series, Shameless creates a correlation between poverty and drug use. The show chooses to represent the working class in a way that assumes all people who belong in it can be associated with drug use.